You know, when we think about all the cool tech around us, the gadgets, the cars, all of it, we don't always think about the materials that make it all possible.
Right, right. Yeah.
So today,
Yeah.
we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty, like the building blocks, and we're diving deep into the world of molybdenum trioxide nanopowder.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, I know. But trust me, this stuff's pretty important. We've got this report here mapping out the whole global market for this material.
Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves, molybdenum trioxide nanopowder, what exactly is that?
So it's basically a powder, but the catch is the particles in this powder are super, super tiny.
Like, how tiny are we talking?
We're talking nanometers here, like a billionth of a meter.
Well, that's mind-bogglingly small.
It is, it is. And the thing is, at that size, this material starts behaving in some really unique ways. It's kind of like how a whole beach full of sand acts differently than, if you just pick up a single grain.
Okay, so it's all about scale. The nanoscale changes the game.
Exactly. So this report, it lays out exactly where this market's at right now and where it's headed. And let me tell you, the numbers are pretty exciting.
Yeah, you mentioned some exciting numbers earlier. Let's break those down for our listeners.
Okay, so in 2025, the global market for this nanopowder stuff is estimated to be around 2,480 million US dollars.
2,480 million. That's not small potatoes.
No, not at all. But here's the kicker. By 2033, it's projected to skyrocket to 774.32 million.
Whoa, hold on. That's more than double.
It is. We're talking a huge jump.
So what's driving this massive growth?
Well, the report points to a big surge in demand from the auto industry, which we'll dig into a little later.
Interesting. So where is all this happening? Let's look at it geographically, starting with North America.
North America is kind of the big dog in this market. Right now, they're holding the lion's share with over 40% of the global revenue.
40%? Wow.
Yeah. In 2025, their market size is estimated to be 917.60 million US dollars.
And what about their growth? Are they keeping pace?
Absolutely. Their projected growth from 2025 to 2033 is a healthy 12.6%. It's a steady climb.
Steady and strong. Now, within North America, I imagine the U.S. is a big part of that.
Oh, for sure. The U.S. market alone is estimated to be 723.99 million in 2025, and their growth is pretty similar, around 12.4%.
So what's pushing that demand in the U.S.?
Well, a big factor is the ever-growing need for super high-performance materials, particularly in electronics and energy storage.
Makes sense. I mean, think about it. Everything's getting smaller, more powerful. We need better batteries.
Right, exactly. Our smartphones, laptops, electric cars, they're all pushing the boundaries of what these materials can do.
So we've got the U.S. leading the charge. What's the situation up north in Canada?
Canada's market is smaller, sure, but their growth is actually even faster, clocking in at 13.4%, with a market size of 110.11 million in 2025.
Okay, so they're punching above their weight, so to speak.
They are. And a lot of that is thanks to, well, the report says it's all the advancements happening in nanotechnology.
Yeah, Canada's got a pretty good reputation in the nanotech field.
They do. They do. And all these nanotech breakthroughs are leading to, all sorts of new applications across different industries.
And rounding out North America, we have Mexico.
Right, Mexico. Their market's projected to be about 83.50 million in 2025, growing at a respectable 13.1%.
So just to sum up North America, we're seeing that thirst for cutting-edge technology, the drive for smaller and more powerful gadgets, and of course, that huge global push for green energy. They're all playing a role.
You got it. Those are the big drivers for this molybdenum trioxide nanopowder market in North America.
Okay, now let's hop across the pond. What's the picture like in Europe?
Europe's also a major player, holding over 30% of the global revenue. In 2025, their market is estimated to be 719.20 US dollars.
That's a significant chunk.
And that's
How's their growth looking?
They're projected to grow at 13.2% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay, solid growth there. Now, Europe's a diverse place. Are there any standout countries we should be looking at?
Definitely. You've got the UK. They're estimated to hit 120.83 million US dollars in 2025 with a really strong growth rate of 14%.
14%, that's impressive. What's fueling that growth?
A lot of it's tied to that global push for renewable energy and sustainable materials. The UK's really invested in that.
Yeah, they've been making some big moves in that direction. And Germany, what's their situation?
Germany, always a powerhouse, right? Their market size in 2025 is estimated at 142.40 million US dollars with a growth rate of 13.4%.
So they're keeping pace.
Oh, yeah. They're really pushing the envelope when it comes to tech innovation and R&D.
Makes sense. So what about France and Italy?
France is sitting at 66.17 million with a growth rate of 12.4%, and Italy's at 61.85 million, growing at 12.6%.
Solid, consistent growth. Now, Russia's also a big part of the European market, right?
Right. Their market is estimated to be 111.48 million in 2025 with a growth rate of 12.2%.
Okay, and we've got a bunch of other European countries also playing their part.
Yeah, you've got Spain at 58.97 million, growing at 12.3%. Sweden at 22.30, growing at 13.3%. Denmark at 15.10 with a 13% growth rate.
Wow.
Switzerland at 10.79, growing at 12.8%. And even Luxembourg at 8.63 million with a strong 13.5% growth rate.
Luxembourg, that's surprising.
Yeah, they're small but mighty. And then the rest of Europe combined, they're looking at a market size of 100.69 million with a growth rate of 11.9%.
So it seems like Europe's really got a strong foundation in a lot of the key sectors that drive this market.
Yeah, their electronics industry, the catalysis sector, and of course the automotive industry, they're all pushing the demand for this nanopowder.
And like we saw in North America, that push for greener solutions is also a big factor.
Absolutely. Europe's got some pretty strict environmental regulations, which is driving the adoption of these advanced materials.
Okay, so Europe's a big player, no doubt. Now let's head east to the Asia-Pacific region.
APAC, that's where things get really interesting. That's where we're seeing some of the fastest growth projected.
Yeah, the report highlighted that. Right now, they're at about 23% of the global revenue, with a market size of $595.2 million US dollars in 2025.
Right, but their projected growth rate, that's what really stands out. Their compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, from 2025 to 2033 is a whopping 17.1%.
17.1%, that's huge. They're really taking off.
They are. There's a lot happening in APAC right now.
Yeah, let's break it down. China obviously is a major force there.
Oh, absolutely. China's market size in 2025 is estimated at 249.98 million US dollars, and they're looking at a growth rate of 16.6%.
And what's driving that incredible growth?
Well, it's that combination of rapid industrial development and some serious advancements in nanotechnology. China's really investing in that area.
Yeah, they're known for their manufacturing prowess and their ambition to be a tech leader.
Exactly. Now, India is another exciting market in APAC. Their starting point is a little smaller, 59.52 million in 2025, but their projected growth rate is even higher than China's at a mind-blowing 19%.
19%, that's phenomenal. What's fueling that growth spurt?
The report highlights the booming electronics and energy storage sectors in India. They're really taking off.
So we've got the giants, China and India, leading the way. What about some of the other players in APAC?
Yeah, you've got Japan and South Korea, two very technologically advanced nations. Japan's market size is 82.14 million in 2025, growing at 15.6%, and South Korea is at 71.42 million with a growth rate of 16.2%.
Solid, consistent growth there. And what about Australia and Southeast Asia?
Australia is estimated at 30.95 million with a CAGR of 16.4%. Singapore at 11.90 with an impressive 17.4% CAGR. Taiwan at 23.21 million, growing at 16.9%.
Wow, everyone's growing at a pretty fast clip.
They are, and collectively the Southeast Asian market is at 39.28 million with a strong 17.9% CAGR.
It's really remarkable how fast that whole region is developing.
Yeah, and the rest of APAC, all combined, they're looking at a market of 26.78 million, also with a very strong growth rate of 16.9%.
So it seems like APAC has this perfect storm brewing with rapid industrialization, tech advancements, and a strong focus on those key sectors like electronics and energy storage.
You got it. And let's not forget about that global push for sustainability, which is playing a role there as well.
All right, we've covered North America, Europe, and APAC. What about the rest of the world, South America, the Middle East, and Africa?
Okay, so those regions, they represent smaller shares of the global market right now, but they've got some interesting things going on. Let's start with South America. Their market share in 2025 is just over 5% at 94.24 million US dollars, and they're projected to grow at 14.9%.
Not a bad growth rate at all.
No, not bad at all. And Brazil is the main driver there. Their market is 40.33 million in 2025, growing at 15.5%.
What's driving that growth in Brazil?
It seems like they're really focused on sustainable and energy-efficient materials. It's a big priority there.
Makes sense. And the rest of South America?
Argentina is at 15.83 million with a growth rate of 15.8%, fueled by their chemical and automotive sectors. Colombia is at 8.39 million, growing at 14.7%. Peru at 7.73 million with a growth rate of 15.1%. Chile at 6.79 million, growing at 15.2%, and the rest of the region combined is at 15.17 million, growing at 14%.
So again, we're seeing similar drivers like in the other regions that focus on electronics, energy technology, and a growing automotive sector.
Yep, those are the big ones. Now, on to the Middle East. Their market share in 2025 is about 2% at 99.20 million US dollars, and they're looking at a growth rate of 15.6%.
Okay, who are the key players in the Middle East?
Saudi Arabia is the biggest market there at 34.92 million with a growth rate of 15.9%.
And what about the UAE and Turkey?
The UAE is at 20.44 million, growing at 16.1%, and Turkey is at 7.94 million with a strong 16.2% growth rate.
And what's driving that growth in Turkey?
It seems like they're really emphasizing sustainability and tech innovation. They're making a conscious effort there.
Yeah, I've heard they've been making some interesting moves in those areas. Are there any other countries worth mentioning in the Middle East?
Yeah, Qatar's got a market of 7.94 million, growing at 15.1%, fueled by their electronics and petroleum industries. Egypt's at 5.95 million, growing at 15.4%, and the rest of the Middle East combined comes in at 22.02 million, with a growth rate of 14.8%.
So it looks like the Middle East is being driven by that demand for electronics, energy storage, sustainable solutions, and of course, the ever-expanding automotive sector.
Precisely. Now, lastly, we've got Africa. They're currently at about 1% of the global market share, with a size of 54.56 million in 2025, and they're projected to grow at 14.5%.
Okay, and within Africa, who are the major players?
South Africa leads the way with a market of 19.21 million in 2025, growing at 15.4%.
And what's driving their growth?
A lot of it has to do with advancements in nanotechnology and R&D. They're really investing in that area.
Yeah, they're trying to position themselves as a hub for innovation on the continent.
Exactly. And Nigeria is another one to watch. Their market is 4.36 million, growing at 14.7%, driven by industrial development and, that trend of replacing older materials with newer, more advanced ones.
Makes sense. And the rest of Africa?
The rest of Africa combined is at 30.99 million, with a growth rate of 13.7%.
So similar themes in Africa, growing demand from electronics, energy, innovations in technology, and that expanding automotive sector we keep seeing everywhere.
Yep, it's a global trend. Okay, so we've covered the regional breakdown. Now let's dive a little deeper into this molybdenum trioxide nanopowder itself. How does the market break down in terms of, the different characteristics of the material?
Yeah, let's get into those specifics. We're talking about particle size, purity levels, all those things that affect how this material is used.
Right, right. So let's start with particle size. The report says that the 80-100 nanometer category, that was the dominant segment in 2025.
So that specific size range, why was it so dominant?
Well, it seems like that size offers a really good balance between, the surface area of the powder and its overall stability.
Okay, so why is surface area important?
Think of it this way. The more surface area you have, the more reactive the material becomes. And that can make a big difference in how effective it is in different applications.
Okay, that makes sense. So 8100 nanometers is a sweet spot for a lot of uses.
Exactly. But the report also highlights that the demand for even smaller particles, like those below 80 nanometers, that's where the fastest growth is happening.
So smaller is better in this case.
In many cases, yes. When you go even smaller, you get that much more surface area, and that means even higher reactivity and efficiency, which is what a lot of industries are really looking for.
Okay, so it's like a race to the bottom in a way to make these particles as small as possible.
In a way, yes. The technology is constantly pushing those boundaries. Now, let's talk about purity. The report says that in 2025, the most dominant segment was the one with a purity level between 99.94% and 99.99%.
Okay, so that's pretty darn pure.
It is. And that level of purity, it strikes a good balance between, getting really good performance and keeping the cost reasonable.
Yeah, cost is always a factor.
Oh, for sure. But here's the thing. Just like with particle size, the demand for even higher purity, like 99.99% or more, that's where the fastest growth is.
So again, higher is better, it seems.
Well, in certain applications, it is.
Yeah.
When you're talking about things like super advanced semiconductors or really sensitive sensors, even the tiniest impurities can really mess things up.
Right, so the cleaner the better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They need those materials to be as pure as possible to get the best performance and reliability.
Okay, so we've got particle size and purity. Now let's talk about what this molybdenum trioxide nanopowder is actually used for. What are its applications?
Okay, so in 2025, the big one, the dominant application, was catalysts.
Catalyst, so that's like speeding up chemical reactions, right?
Exactly. And this nanopowder It's got some amazing catalytic properties, which makes it super useful in industries like petrochemical production, oil refining, and even things like environmental cleanup.
So it's helping make those industries more efficient and cleaner.
Exactly. But the report also highlights that the fastest growing application area is lithium-ion batteries.
No surprise there, right?
Mm.
Everyone's talking about batteries these days.
It's true. With the rise of electric vehicles and all our portable electronics, the demand for high-performance batteries is just exploding.
And this nanopowder, how does it help with batteries?
It can really boost the energy density and lifespan of those batteries, which is, a huge deal.
Yeah, that's like the holy grail of battery technology, right?
Pretty much. But it doesn't stop there. This material has a whole bunch of other applications as well.
Hmm.
We're talking about things like electrochemical capacitors, nanofibers, nanowires, optoelectronic components, gas sensors.
Wow, that's quite a list.
It is. It is. There's even a category in the report called Others, which just goes to show how versatile this material is and how many potential uses it has.
So it's not just about, making our gadgets and cars better. It's got its fingers on a lot of different pies.
Definitely. Now let's look at who's actually using this material, which industries are driving this demand.
Right, let's talk end-use industries.
Okay, so in 2025, the biggest end-use industry was electronics, no surprise there.
Makes sense. And why is that?
Well, this nanopowder has really good electrical conductivity and thermal stability, which are super important properties for things like semiconductors and sensors, all the building blocks of our electronics.
Right, and we already talked about how everything's getting smaller and more powerful.
Yeah, so that trend of miniaturization is a big driver here. But the fastest growing end-use industry is actually automotive and transportation.
Again, no surprise, with all the talk about electric vehicles.
Exactly. But it's not just electric cars. There's also a global push to make all vehicles cleaner and more fuel efficient, and this nanopowder can play a role in that too.
Interesting. How so?
Well, it can be used to enhance the performance and lifespan of various car parts.
Okay, so it's making our cars better, whether they're electric or gas-powered.
Precisely. Now, there are other important end-use industries as well, like chemicals, textiles, ceramics, glass, you name it.
So this material really is popping up everywhere.
It is. It's a very versatile material. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but let's zoom out for a second and talk about the bigger picture. Like, what are the big forces driving this market? What's holding it back? And what trends are we seeing?
Yeah, let's talk market dynamics.
All right, so on the driver side, a big one is obviously advancements in nanotechnology itself.
Right, as scientists get better at manipulating materials at that super tiny scale, new possibilities open up.
Exactly. And that's driving innovation in all sorts of industries, including this one. Another big driver is the growth of the global electronics sector. We've already talked about that quite a bit.
Right, it's a huge market that just keeps growing.
It does. It does. And then there's the energy storage market. With the push for electric vehicles and renewable energy, the demand for better batteries is going through the roof.
Yeah, and this nanopowder is a key player in that space.
It is. It is. Now, on the flip side, there are some things that could potentially hold this market back. One is the fluctuations in raw material prices.
Right, so if the price of molybdenum, which is a key ingredient in this nanopowder, if that goes up, it could affect the whole market.
Exactly. It could make the production more expensive, which could slow down adoption.
Makes sense. What else could hold this market back?
Well, there's always the possibility of alternative materials popping up.
So something even better could come along and replace this nanopowder.
It's possible. That's just the nature of innovation, right? Someone's always trying to come up with something new and better.
Yeah, it's a constant race. Now, what about trends? What are some of the big trends shaping this market?
Well, a big one is environmental regulations. Governments all over the world are pushing for cleaner technologies and more sustainable materials, and that's creating a lot of opportunities for this nanopowder, especially in things like catalytic converters and high-efficiency batteries.
Right, because it can help reduce emissions and make energy use more sustainable.
Exactly. Another big trend is research and development, or R&D. Companies and researchers are constantly looking for new ways to use this material, new ways to improve its properties, and new ways to make it more efficiently.
So it's a dynamic field with lots of exciting developments on the horizon.
It is. And all this research and development is what's going to drive the adoption of this material even further in the future.
Okay, so we've covered drivers, restraints, and trends. Before we wrap up, let's take a quick look at the competitive landscape. Who are the big players in this market?
Well, the report says it's a pretty competitive market, with a mix of both global and regional players. Some of the big names mentioned are Nanoshell LLC, Nanography Nanotechnology, SkySpring Nanomaterials Inc., EdgeTech Industries LLC, Novarials Corporation, and Nano Research Elements Inc.
So it's not just one or two companies dominating the market. That's good to see.
Yeah, it's a healthy mix. And the report also mentioned some recent activities from some of these companies.
Oh, yeah. What were those?
Well, in October 2022, Merck KGaA, they opened a brand new manufacturing facility in France.
A new facility. What for?
Their goal was to really ramp up production for their life sciences division.
Okay, so not necessarily just for this nanopowder, but it shows they're investing in advanced materials.
Exactly. And in April 2022, S-Nano, they made a big breakthrough in something called nanodispersion technology.
Nanodispersion technology, what's that?
Basically, it's about how well you can disperse these tiny nanoparticles in different liquids or materials.
Okay, and why is that important?
Well, if you can disperse them really well, it makes the material much more effective in different applications. It's all about getting those tiny particles to spread out evenly.
Okay, so it's like making sure the ingredients in your cake batter are mixed properly.
Exactly. So it's a competitive market, lots of innovation happening, and some big players are making moves.
Right, that gives us a good overview of the competitive landscape. Okay, so let's bring it all home for our listeners. What are the key takeaways from this deep dive into the world of molybdenum trioxide nanopowder?
All right, so we've seen that this market is on track for some serious growth, going from 280 million US dollars in 2025 to over 7 billion by 2033. That's huge.
Huge is an understatement.
It is. Now, North America and Europe, they're leading the pack right now, but the Asia-Pacific region, they're catching up fast. They've got the fastest projected growth.
Yeah, that 17.1% CAGR, that's really impressive.
It is. And we also talked about how the demand for smaller particle sizes and higher purity levels is growing the fastest. Basically, the smaller and purer, the better.
Right, it's all about getting the most bang for your buck in terms of performance.
Exactly. And when we looked at applications and end-use industries, we saw that while catalysts and electronics are still big, the lithium-ion battery and automotive sectors are really taking off.
Yeah, those are the ones to watch for sure, especially with the push for electric vehicles and cleaner energy.
It's all connected. So if you're looking for a material that's not only shaping the electronics we use today, but is also playing a big role in the future of transportation and energy, well, this is it.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how this one material, molybdenum trioxide nanopowder, is finding its way into so many different areas of our lives.
It is. And it really makes you think, what other materials are out there quietly being developed and researched that are going to revolutionize other industries in the future?
Yeah, it's a thought-provoking question for sure. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.